everybody, ladies and gents. Thank you for listening. My name is Dr. Ebenezer Lai, and welcome to this podcast. This is, of course, my first podcast of the year, and as such, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a prosperous new year filled with God's protection, His blessing, and His speed. Martin Luther King Jr. once remarked that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. Now, my thoughts, my wishes, and my prayers for all my listeners this year is that you will be vocal and loud about the things that matter to humanity, and that our voices will be filled with passionate intensity in our struggle to see come to pass all the good things that we hope for our country and for the world. My topic of examination today is legal education and the limited access to it in Ghana. In the year following our independence from British colonial oppression, our forebears, realizing the importance of law to the larger Ghanaian social system, decided upon the passing of the Legal Practitioners Act. The goal was to create and provide the necessary structural facilities and funding required to allow Ghana the ability to train its own lawyers. The Legal Practitioners Act in turn created the General Legal Council, a statutory body which was given the authority to establish the Ghana School of Law, where professional legal training would be accessible to our population. Since this time, the Ghana School of Law in Accra has entirely on its own produced all of Ghana's practitioner needs. Now, being myself a lawyer, I am fully aware of the full range of benefits carried by a good legal education to both the individual who studies law and in the nation in which that individual practices the law. For law lies at the very heart of our social system, for it is the means through which our everyday lives are organized and regulated. Through law, we are able to organize our economic activity in a manner which ensures fairness and avoids chaos. Our constitutional arrangements, with all of its rights, obligations, and provisions of accountability, are similarly established by law. Equally, through law, we are able to establish the rules that govern our social interactions with one another, and by such we are able to deter and censure criminal and illegal activity. Put simply, a robust, dynamic, and innovative legal system lies at the very heart of the proper functioning of any progressive, free, and open society. And Ghana is no different. Now, over the last few years, there has been much passionate debate in our country about the access to legal education. Many have expressed what are genuine frustrations about the ever-tightening and strict selection criteria which Ghanaians are required to meet in order to gain admission to the Ghana School of Law. Having built up over considerable length of time, these frustrations found expression in the form of a legal proceeding which went before the Supreme Court of Ghana, in which the strict criteria for selection into the Ghana Law School was argued by claimants to be unconstitutional and unnecessarily draconian. In considering the matter, the Supreme Court agreed with the claimants, ruling in 2017 that the admission requirements at the Ghana School of Law were indeed unconstitutional. In defiance and in response to the Supreme Court's ruling, the General Legal Council is at this very moment lobbying Parliament to pass a legislative instrument which would legalize the very unconstitutional and draconian entry standards. The argument carried by many of those in support of this legislative instrument is that the law profession is indeed an honorable one, and that as such, the only way to protect its honorable standards is by having such onerous and unusually strict requirements for admission to the Ghana School of Law. Now, whilst I understand the origins of such an argument, I must state clearly that I very much disagree with it. And I suggest that we begin to think much more broadly about the issue of access to legal education in Ghana. For it is not just a standards issue, but I think that it is much more importantly and most unequivocally an economic issue. It is a social issue, and it is also a human rights issue. It is an economic issue because we now have in our country fewer lawyers than we require. And the gap in the numbers is having a negative impact on our economy. We are a population of 28 million people, and yet we currently have a little over 2,700 lawyers serving our population currently, with 2,000 of these working in Accra alone, while the other 700 are thinly spread across other regions. Now, in racial terms, that is one lawyer to every 80,000 Ghanaians. By contrast, the District of Columbia in the United States, a stretch of land no bigger than our smallest region in Ghana, has serving its population a total of 52,711 lawyers. And this huge number, many times the number that we have serving in our country, serves a population of 681,170, a population that is many times fewer, our 28 million. Now, with similar contrast, the city-state of Singapore, with a population of 5.6 million people, has serving its population a number of 4,834 lawyers. Now, when you take into account the population of Singapore, that's a ratio of one lawyer to every 1,120 people in Singapore. Many times fewer than the ratio in Ghana. Now, if limiting access to legal education produced any tangible economic benefits, then surely these leading nations would be doing exactly that. Rather, the United States, Singapore, and other leading nations have higher numbers of lawyers within their countries and are even racing towards expanding access to more of its population or more of their population that want to study law. The economic case for increasing the number of lawyers we are producing is very simple. With our meager number of lawyers, 74% of which are concentrated in Accra alone, the forces of supply and demand work to hike up legal fees. Because there is low supply and greater demand for legal practitioners within our population, lawyers are able to raise their fees extortionately. The consequence, of course, for anyone who has desperate need for legal representation in Ghana is that they have very little choice than to pay, seeing as there aren't that many lawyers to choose from anyway. And it also means that those who cannot afford the exorbitant charges have no access to justice. With a greater supply of legal practitioners, competition will increase, and the prices for legal services will be brought down as a result. This means that for many individual families, money spent on exorbitant legal fees is money that can now be spent on other essentials like food, school fees, and clothing for the kids. Or even for the businessman in Ghana, it could mean an extra investment into his business so that it is able to expand and hire more people. The economic case for expanding the access to legal education is perhaps strengthened all the more when one considers that if all of the over 3,000 people who are qualified to receive legal practitioner training in Ghana were given that training today, that would be 3,000 more people who would be in professional employment, contributing to our economy and paying taxes. That would be 3,000 more people who could possibly take the necessary step of establishing their own law firms, which would create even more jobs and help expand our economy all the more. And it certainly would mean 3,000 less people unemployed. Therefore, restricting access to legal education doesn't strengthen us economically. It rather makes us weaker, and it negatively impacts our economic growth. Now, similar to the economic argument for expanding access to legal education, the social argument is very clear and unequivocal. Ours is a nation founded upon a dream. The dream that the African would demonstrate to the world that he is capable of managing his own affairs. We have always been a nation of dreamers, and our dream can simply be expressed as the creation for our people of a nation where they can enjoy a rising state of well-being, and to make it possible for all of our people to develop their gifts and talents in a growing and fruitful society. The national character which best matches the glory of our dream is one which is determined to make Ghana a country where one's background is not a barrier to one's success. A country where one can go as far as their gifts and talents will take them. Now, the restricting of legal education is, of course, not at all consistent with this preferred national character. How are we supposed to make our nation great and strong when people are denied the right to pursue their dream of a law career, even though they qualify? How do we defend the cause of freedom and the cause of right when we erect barriers instead of building bridges and expanding access to a key profession so vital to our national life? And how can we possibly hope to develop our territory to its desired levels if we continue to restrict our nation's greatest resource? The problems that we face in our country cannot be solved by naysayers whose horizons are limited by the decaying paradigms of the past. For as a wise man once said, we need men and women in our country to dream of things that could be and ask, why not? The fact of the matter is that when it comes to this issue of legal education and the access of it, we need more people going into law school in our country and not less. We need to build more schools of law in the other regions of our country. Not all 28 million Ghanaians live in Accra, and it is therefore without much sense to have located in Accra alone the only institution certified to train legal practitioners. That is certainly not adequate for a nation of 28 million people. We need further institutions established in the other parts of the country, and the entire system of legal practitioner training needs to be decentralized. Expanding access to legal education is the best thing that we can do for our country in this matter. It is good for our economy, and it is good for our society. And to those who are still not convinced by the arguments I have put forward in this recording, and still hold fast to the reasoning of maintaining standards, I simply say this, that if we are able to expand access, then we will be better able to keep standards. For if we cannot admit the people who are many, what merit or importance will there be in maintaining the standards which are few? Jack Kennedy once implored his countrymen to think of education as the means of developing our greatest abilities. And today, I ask my own countrymen and women to do the same. For in each of the 3,000 Ghanaians waiting to be admitted into the Ghana School of Law lies a dream and an ambition, which, if met and fulfilled, would be transposed into a benefit for all the 28 million people in our nation. And it is a step that will make us ever greater, ever stronger, and ever able to meet our future. I know that this is a topical issue, especially